Story 1. When I was at a water park, sitting on a floating tube in a lazy river, my friend wanted to get revenge. He went underwater, leaving his tube behind, but he targeted the wrong person. I witnessed a random man, around 50 years old, screaming and moving while my friend squeezed his rear end very hard for about 10 seconds. I still tear up when I tell this story. Story 2. The time I was walking a patient to her room in the emergency room from triage, I asked her if the man a few steps behind us was with her. The lady in her 70s said, "Yes, I slept with him a few times, and he's followed me around ever since." Her husband of 50 years replied, "Yes, that's pretty much it." Story 3. The streets were flooded, and a man was walking home when he suddenly became 2 feet shorter. Turns out he fell into a pothole. I was that man. I was also 8 years old and only 4 feet tall. Story 4. My brother was about 15. I had made a smoothie and pancake batter. I told my brother I put his smoothie in the fridge and to go get it. I went to the living room and he came soon after with his smoothie. I wondered why he poured it into a different glass. I asked him if he liked it. With a distant stare, his face revealing nothing, he said, "Yes, this is good." But his voice betrayed him. I knew he didn't like it. Then it hit me. He had put the pancake batter into a glass and was sipping it, probably trying to figure out how to dispose of it without me noticing. I couldn't breathe. I was laughing so much. That kid had some nerve, trying to spare my feelings and bravely drinking pancake batter. Story 5. My grandma had this old lady scooter that went so ridiculously fast that she fell off and broke her shoulder, which is not the funny part. My dad let my siblings and me play with it. We would whip it around the neighborhood, tie ropes to it, and pull people on skateboards. This thing literally went very fast. My sister was much younger than I, so if we wanted to ride together, I would sit on the seat while she sat by my feet on the floorboard and held on to the handles. One night, it was time for dinner, so we were scootering inside. I got off to open the front door, and she accidentally accelerated the scooter and flew past me through the front door into the dining area, crashing into the wall. The little engine was still revving while the front wheel, handles, and basket were completely embedded in the drywall. My dad was in the kitchen making hamburger helper when he heard her screaming and looked over just in time to see her zoom by out of control. It's one of the funniest things she has ever done, and we were crazy kids. Story 6. A guy I went out with from Hinge quacked at me during dinner. I was in the middle of talking when he suddenly quacked like a duck for no reason. I stared at him, pretended I didn't hear it, and continued talking. He later texted to apologize, saying he thought it would be funny but realized it turned out awkward. I didn't go out with him again. Story 7. A shirtless man once complimented me, and I panicked and told him he had a nice shirt before quickly walking away. Story 8. When my husband ate an edible for the first time, he kept asking me to take him to urgent care. I asked what he thought they would do for him, and he said, "I don't know. Make me unhigh." He hasn't tried it since, and that's okay. Story 9. On my grandmother's 91st birthday, she opened a card, and 50 pounds fell out. My grandmother exclaimed, "Oh, money, the key to life." The entire room erupted in laughter. Less than 3 months later, we were at her will reading. When we learned the value of her estate, which wasn't large, the 4 of us started giggling, then laughing. Key to life. My mom shouted in hysterics. The solicitor thought we were crazy. Story 10. I always laugh when I explain the concept of murderous stupidity. The idea is that some animals are so reckless that they might accidentally harm you while trying to do other things. One of my Amish neighbors was trampled but survived because a high school track team ran by. The sheep, upon seeing 10 or 20 people in white running in a vaguely herd-like formation, decided they needed to join the fleeing group. They ran straight through the 2 strands of electric fence and tried to join the runners. The runners, upon seeing 40 stampeding sheep, ran faster. The Amish man was returning home on his horse. Seeing the stampede, he immediately tried to get his horse in the way to stop the charge, assuming the runners would not just pass him. The horse, however, saw the stampede, bucked him off, and ran away. The runners passed him by, and the sheep followed, lightly trampling him and bruising both his body and his pride. At this point, he decided that instead of continuing on foot, it would be better to ask for a ride from my dad. They eventually found the group a couple of miles down the road, where everyone stopped from exhaustion. Then came the ordeal of herding 40 sheep down the road and trying to keep them from bolting again. At no point did the sheep want to harm him, but one misplaced step and reckless behavior could have claimed another victim, all because a track coach thought it would be a great idea to run on unfamiliar roads in the fresh country air. Story 11. We got beans and water. At the Taco Bell drive-thru, past midnight, they were out of everything because the truck was arriving tomorrow. The people in front of us were very upset, and the guy on the speaker, exasperated, finally said, "Sir, we got beans and water." They pulled forward, got 4 waters, and were still complaining. We were laughing in the car, skipped the little speaker box, and made it to the window. We heard it all. Easiest shift of your life. They started laughing, recognizing us as part of the service industry too. Absolutely amazing, the best memory from college. Beans and water of all things. Story 12. My husband goes by his middle name. One time, he got a job working at Sears in the auto department. This was back in the 1980s, and they wore personalized overalls with sewn-on name tags, but they never asked what he liked to be called. They just guessed. His name tag had the wrong name, and he didn't respond to it. Some of the guys thought maybe he was hard of hearing, he isn't, while others thought he was a little slow, he isn't. So they would yell instructions really loud and pantomime what they needed him to do. The first time he told that story, I almost cried laughing. The way he tells it is so funny that now I tell that story about him and laugh each time. I love him so much. Story 13. The time I nearly injured my niece. I'm standing outside the restaurant where I had just taken my sister and her daughter, who was 7 years old at the time, for lunch. While my sister and I are chatting, my niece comes up and playfully bumps me. Instinctively, I bump back. Now, I'm a big guy, so my niece goes flying and lands hard on her back, maybe 6 feet away from me, her little schoolgirl skirt flying up and covering her face completely. I'm horrified, convinced that she has seriously hurt herself, and I'm thinking that when I pull her skirt down, there's going to be a mess everywhere. I'm pale, thinking, oh no, I might have injured her, just as I rush over to her. My niece sits up straight, completely fine, and says, "Wow, your belly is powerful." Relief washes over me, and my sister starts laughing, so now I'm laughing too. So hard that I can't breathe. At this point, we realize we're in full view of everyone seated on one side of the restaurant, and these poor people trying to enjoy their milkshakes and meals are watching me laugh uncontrollably at the little girl I just sent sprawling onto the pavement. This makes us laugh even harder, and we're struggling to regain our composure and get into the car before someone calls Child Protective Services. Now that I'm writing this out, it might be a "you had to be there" story, but it's certainly one that gets retold at every family gathering. Story 14. My brother and I tricked our babysitter into taking us to see Team America in theaters. Watching that poor woman try to explain the puppet scene to my dad is one of the highlights of my life. Story 15. An old coworker of mine told me one day he came into work and it was really icy outside. When he stepped out of his truck, he slipped and ended up partially sliding under it. Another coworker happened to be walking past and just missed him slipping but saw him under the truck. She asked, "What are you doing under there?" He replied, "Oh, nothing, just checking my oil." He shared that story with me over 10 years ago, and I still randomly think of it and laugh. Story 16. One time, I thought my house was haunted, but it turns out a feral cat had just moved in without my realizing it. Story 17. I was playing Minecraft on a friend's server in college, and just before I joined, he told me that his little brother was on the server, so no swearing. I agreed, but I did not realize that your name appears in the corner when you enter the server. So I entered with the name Smegma Larry, and I heard the entire lobby of college guys give a long, disappointed "ah-wah." And then this little high-pitched voice asked, "What's Smegma?" Sorry, kid. Maybe I ruined your childhood, but I laugh every time I think about that. Story 18. My daughters were about 4 years old when we set up hammocks for them. One was on top and the other was right below her. I guess the one on top had eaten something that didn't agree with her. She sat up and then leaned over the edge of her hammock to vomit right onto her sister. The sister started crying and tried to get out of the hammock while panicking, but just couldn't escape. She was covered in vomit and upset. I got her out and she ended up vomiting on me. I then grabbed the other daughter and we all rushed into the house and straight to the shower. My son, who was just a few feet away, slept through the entire ordeal. It wasn't funny at the time, but we all laugh about it every time it comes up. Story 19. I was at my ex's house about to fall asleep in that half-asleep, half-awake state where you aren't really thinking clearly anymore. I was kind of dreaming when I said, "I'm hallucinating. There's a mammoth," and she laughed so hard that I woke up. Story 20. Be at a sushi restaurant where the owner and head chef is my neighbor. An army veteran on vacation is getting drunk and talking loudly, making it clear that he was stationed in Okinawa. He tells the chef his order in Japanese. "Chef, that's great, but I'm Korean." Story 21. I tried to throw a frisbee to a friend, but it hit his beer bottle instead, striking his head. He exclaimed in surprise, "I don't know how it happened, but I did it." The best part is that he had just talked some trash about my throwing skills. Story 22. When my friend told me she got the top of a snooker cue stuck in her ear, I could not understand how she managed that. She was confused about why I couldn't comprehend how it happened. We both stared at each other blankly and then burst out laughing, completely dumbfounded. She's American and I'm not. It was a cotton swab. Story 23. The time I received a fancy box of chocolates for my birthday. My boyfriend has a sweet tooth, and a few days after my birthday, he was home alone with the box. He wanted to try all the chocolates, each one being unique, but he didn't want to deprive me of the experience of trying them myself. So he took each piece, bit off one half, and put it back in the box. When I later opened the box and saw the aftermath, he innocently described his thought process. The mental image makes me laugh every time. Story 24. I had a dream that my supervisor was going to make waffles for the entire morning shift. I checked my phone and saw a text from my friend with a Nigel Thornberry image. I woke up feeling excited about the waffles. I got halfway to work and then realized that my supervisor doesn't work on Thursdays and it was all just a dream. Story 25. I have a garden office and a place out back where I can take a quick break instead of going inside the house each time. My wife occasionally looks out the back door, and if the two activities coincide, she will point and laugh at me. One day, I glanced out of my office window to check for parked cars in my driveway and quickly stepped out. Halfway through, I saw a figure in the doorway, so I turned and waved, still in the middle of what I was doing and laughing. At that moment, I realized it wasn't my wife, but a friend of hers who had come to say goodbye for a few months before going to another country. She had parked out of sight of my window. Thankfully, she never returned and stayed abroad. I can't stay here if she comes back. Story 26. I came out of the shower and found my dripping wet husband just standing by the bed frame with his legs resting on it. The corner had a smooth wooden ball, and he was perched there, checking his phone absent-mindedly. I burst into laughter and asked what he was doing, and he just gave me his big dorky grin and said he didn't know. We still laugh about this. Story 27. When I was 16, my high school orchestra was going on a trip abroad, and the permission slip required the signature of 2 parents or guardians. My dad died when I was 12, and I was certain that was common knowledge among my teachers. My orchestra teacher knew for sure, so when I turned in the slip with my mom's signature, he didn't say anything. However, the office administrator sent it back, requesting the other parent or guardian's signature. I went into the office and informed her that my dad had passed away, but she acted as if her request was still valid. She told me to figure it out if I wanted to go. My mom didn't want to deal with this issue, so she told me to just turn it in again. The next day, I arrived at school with my dad's urn and the slip that had been returned twice. I placed the urn on her desk, moved the pen next to the slip, and asked her to sign it. She sat there, dumbfounded, as I coaxed the urn to sign my paperwork. Finally, I shrugged and asked if she had any ideas. Our vice principal walked in, and I asked for his advice on how to get my dad to sign. The expression on his face was priceless. He took the slip, signed off on it, handed it in, and excused me. We had a new administrator the following week, and that's when I realized that properly utilizing the situation was going to be hilarious. Story 28. When we were all still young and drank too much, we had a bonfire one night, enjoying drinks excessively. My now husband was sitting in a plastic lawn chair when one of the chair legs broke off. He was leaning forward in the chair, so he hadn't noticed it yet. His best friend got up and gave him a huge high five, which pushed him back in his seat, causing him to fall backward. The other chair legs broke off and he slammed to the ground. It was probably the funniest thing I've ever seen. For added amusement, his intoxicated self couldn't figure out what had happened, so he spent the rest of the night afraid of high fives, telling everyone that a high five attacked him. I love that beautiful idiot. Story 29. A few years ago, I was a volunteer first responder. One night, my partner and I were returning to the station after a call. As part of this, we had to inform dispatch that the vehicle was back. Rescue 6 in quarters. I had been trying to make my partner laugh on the radio all night, so as I was backing into the bay, I casually said, "Have I ever told you about the time I soiled my pants in 7th grade?" Trying to catch him off guard. I expected him to respond with surprise and laughter, but all I got was silence. I looked over at him, and he was staring at me wide-eyed and open-mouthed, with the microphone in his hand right next to his mouth. He then released the key up button. He completely lost it, laughing uncontrollably. "I was keyed up, you idiot." The radio, which had been filled with traffic all night, went silent. Everyone hesitated to key up again, not wanting the entire county's emergency services network to think they were the one who made that comment. At the time, our radios didn't broadcast an identifier when we keyed up, so until someone spoke and identified themselves, there was no way to tell who said what on the air. To this day, only my partner and I know who the middle school pants soiler was. It was me. I was the one who soiled my pants. Story 30. I clean for a living. An older couple in their mid-80s has a very excitable dog that I love. The dog was losing control when I arrived to clean. The husband was trying to get the dog into the study while the wife was telling me what she wanted done that day. Suddenly, the dog ran right in front of her, causing her to fall. She quickly got back up, scolded the dog, and yelled, "John, it's all right. I have life insurance. No need to check on me." Story 31. My fiancé was trying to wake me up one morning gently, as I am usually quite disoriented for the first 30 seconds after waking. He heard me ask him a muffled question in my half-asleep state and requested I repeat it. Apparently, I sat up, said oink oink, and went back to sleep immediately. Story 32. We were talking about food during my 10th grade English class for some unknown reason, and a classmate tried to say, "I like a good Spanish dish," but he actually said, "I like a good Spanish dick." I was in tears for a solid 30 minutes and could not stop laughing. My teacher eventually sent me out into the hall to compose myself, but I couldn't. Story 33. One time, I was at Walmart in one of the aisles when a hula hoop rolled toward me. I grabbed it and rolled it back the way it came. A few seconds later, I heard a little kid scream from another aisle, "Mom!" It came back. I scooted away to not ruin the mystery. Story 34. I accidentally took a t-shirt with "Burn Your Local Church" written on it, featuring a burning church design, when I first visited my then-girlfriend's extremely religious Baptist parents. Story 35. The jorts and jeans saga from Reddit and Twitter a few years ago started when I shared the screenshots. If the person is a cat lover or works in a specific type of workplace, they often end up in tears from laughing. Story 36. I spent a considerable amount on solid, high-quality fall protection gear because I worked in masonry and was often several stories in the air. I had an apprentice. He was a pretentious little individual, but a solid worker with a good work ethic. He was just too confident for my liking and didn't like to wear his helmet. He also had a tendency to try to correct me. One day, I was hooked up to my new auto belay line and said, "I'm done," before leaning backwards off the scaffolding. He freaked out and looked over the edge to see me slowly lowering to the ground, laying back with my arms crossed, pretending to nap as my safety gear brought me to the ground safely. Story 37. I had an assignment in primary school where each student was given a letter. I was assigned the letter H verbally. At one point, I started crying because I couldn't come up with any words that started with H. The teacher ended up calling my parents to come pick me up. To this day, I have no idea why I completely forgot about the letter, but it pains me to think of my parents' reaction when they came to get me. Story 38. I was picking up some dry cleaning, and the owner was chatting with the woman in front of me. They obviously knew each other. When it was my turn, the owner told me what they were talking about. She said the lady's husband is a pirate. I asked, "He's a what?" She repeated, "Pirate." I was so confused but listened to her story and nodded as we went about our business. Near the end of our transaction, she mentioned that the lady's husband works at the Oakland airport. Then I realized he is a pilot. I could not get out of there fast enough. My niece was waiting in the car, and when I got in, I could not stop laughing. I told her the story, and then she couldn't stop laughing either. I had the owner repeat it twice because I couldn't understand her. My niece added, "Yeah, he's a pirate. You know, with a peg leg and eye patch." I felt foolish, but retelling that story always makes me laugh at my own confusion. Who the heck is a pirate nowadays? Story 39. A classmate was asked in language class to use the word incompetent in a sentence, and he responded, "You, sir, are a very incompetent teacher," before storming out of the room. Story 40. Maybe the second or third time I hung out with someone I was seeing, we were at their friend's house and we smoked marijuana. Up until then, my experience with it was while I was drinking, and I had someone else exhale it into my mouth. This time, however, he taught me to do it myself, and I, being the kind of person who thinks, "I don't feel it, so I must take more," ended up more or less not in control of my body. I remember smoking a cigarette outside when it hit me all at once. I had to sit in his car as my brain went in and out of a dreamlike state while I was awake. It was the strangest feeling. I remember saying that my arms weren't my own and other things. Meanwhile, he sat in the car with me, apparently trying not to laugh. He drove us back to his dad's house, where he was living at the time, and it took every fiber of my being to walk across the yard, up the steps, and past the living room where his dad was sitting, all while trying my best to seem normal but tired. I sank into that bed for a couple of hours while he tended to me. I can't say that it was exactly enjoyable at the time, but my now husband laughs every time it's brought up. I appreciate that he didn't laugh at me then, even though he wanted to, so it's all good. Story 41. There was an older lady going through basic training with us. It was winter in Missouri and she was from Puerto Rico. We were doing a field exercise and sleeping in our tiny tents with our assigned battle buddies. It was cold, around 30 degrees Fahrenheit, in the middle of the night, and she needed to go to the bathroom. She didn't want to walk in the cold to the portable restroom, so she took care of her business while staying warm without telling anyone. The next day, everyone packed up, returned to the barracks, and started cleaning their gear. She was off in a corner with her sleeping bag, acting secretive and strange. As we were cleaning, our drill sergeant entered the bay to ensure we were doing the right thing and not sleeping. He spotted her and asked, "What are you doing, Private?" After what felt like an eternity, we found out that she had soiled her sleeping bag because it was too cold to walk to the restroom. From that day forward, we were awakened by a drill sergeant saying, "Wake up, Echo Company. Physical training formation in 15 minutes. Full winter physical training gear because it's extremely cold outside." That was almost 15 years ago. I don't remember her name or her face, but I always say that whenever it is 35 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, it is freezing cold outside. Story 42. When I had my wisdom teeth removed, I had the procedure done under sedation. I knew it was going to be a good day when the anesthetist told me I was getting the good medication. The next thing I remember after that was hearing my boyfriend tell me to stop chewing my tongue. They had numbed my whole face, and it felt just like another lump of gauze. I told him, "It's not my tongue." He must have looked worried because the nurse then said, "That's nothing." We had a lady in last week who swore that her feet weren't real. Now I'm concerned. Very subtly and without arousing suspicion, I leaned forward out of the chair, stuck my legs straight outward, and checked that I was, at the very least, wearing my own shoes. They were metallic silver all-stars, unmistakable, especially after giving them an experimental wiggle and observing for a moment. No, it turned out to be completely obvious. I was about as stealthy as someone who's drunk 12 pints. My ex said it was the funniest thing he had ever seen me do. In the hour that followed, I was discharged, escaped the guiding grasp of him and the nurse, rolled down the side of the car, and fell into a bush while giggling hysterically. I performed a word-perfect version of "We Will Rock You" on a 0.75-second time delay, got back out of the car at my house, rolled along the side again, and then immediately fell into another bush outside my front door. I also had only about a 2-minute memory at the time, so about 40 minutes later, when I finished demanding sandwiches, I found a bunch of twigs and leaves caught in my clothes and asked, "Did I fall in a bush?" The look on both my ex's and my mother's faces when he said, "Yes, twice, will never leave me." Story 43. When I was in elementary school, I was friends with two sisters. Let's call them Betty and Veronica. Betty was loud and tomboyish, her wardrobe consisting mainly of jeans and camouflage, while Veronica was a girly girl who rarely spoke above a whisper. One day, Betty was at soccer practice, so Veronica and I were playing outside. We decided to visit their newborn barn kittens, but the mother had evidently moved them, so we turned to leave. Then the goose mafia showed up. They had geese that acted as guard animals, and they took their job seriously. They surrounded us in a ring, slowly closing in, snapping their beaks and hissing. I vividly remember thinking, I thought I would live past 3rd grade, but I guess this is how it all ends. Then Veronica, sweet, shy Veronica, who only wore pastel colors and spoke in a permanent whisper, grabbed an empty ice cream bucket and slammed the nearest goose on the head with a resounding thwunk. She then bellowed, "Run!" and the two of us sprinted up the hill as fast as our legs could carry us. I haven't talked to those girls in years, but I still laugh at the adventures we had. Story 44. When my father-in-law, at the wedding reception of a white family friend marrying into an Asian family, stood up in front of everyone and congratulated the wrong Asian man for getting married. Story 45. After having great time with my girlfriend, I uttered the phrase, "You and I are like mycorrhiza. I am a mushroom, and you are a log." We laughed for a long time, and naturally, there was no intimate continuation. Story 46. My ex was not a big drinker. He only had a drink a couple of times a year. I don't drink at all. One time we were out with friends and he had one drink. As I was driving us home later, I took a left turn out of the bar parking lot, and he saw a car coming from our right. It was about half a mile away and was not going very fast. However, he reacted as though it was about to crash into us and kill us both, including a genuine scream that I like to imitate when telling this story. Story 47. When I was a child, my parents had a mortgage broker over. My dad practically ran into my room, partially closed the door, and whispered, "I really need to fart." He then proceeded to let out a loud one that echoed down the hall. After that, he fully closed the door and continued expelling loud aftershocks. Hunched over, we just looked at each other and laughed for about 10 minutes. I'm laughing just writing this. Story 48. I once waved back at someone who wasn't even talking to me and tripped over my own foot mid-wave. The whole mall saw it. Story 49. My best friend, his little brother, and I were celebrating the 4th of July at their family's house with a group of parents, grandparents, and kids. And beer. Definitely beer. It was in one of those large suburban neighborhoods, so we felt a bit out of place. Fireworks were not allowed, so we focused on beer and making sparkler bombs. My friend's little brother packed one that was absolutely insane. He mounted it in the front yard and angled it without much planning. Their family was gathered around, enjoying the delightful summer sun and watching. We lit the sparkler bomb and ran. It made a glorious screech and then launched a hot wad of burning debris across the street, hitting the neighbor's garage door like a cannonball against the hull of a ship. Bang! The color, the sound, the intensity. It was a marvel. Thankfully, the neighbor's family was not home, and we quickly stomped out the burning projectile and disposed of the evidence. The sounds, the flash, it was all glorious. The dreams that can only come from youth and recklessness. Story 50. My aunt, a Catholic baby boomer, wanted to watch Pineapple Express because she knew I liked the movie. She suggested we each have an edible beforehand. I agreed and got my lowest dose edibles, giving her half a gummy. I took 3. She watched the movie while I observed her. She made a face that suggested something smelled slightly off for about the first 20 minutes. Then she started smiling. Then came the giggles and the exclamation, "Oh my!" When the movie ended, I went to grab a drink, and when I got back, she was gone. I heard the bath running, so I thought, okay, whatever. 15 minutes later, I heard her calling to me, half sobbing, because her left leg wouldn't work, and she was trapped in the tub. I walked in with my eyes closed and said, "Okay, put my hands where they need to be to lift you, and let's get you out." Took us a few tries, but she got out of the tub. We were laughing so hard, and she kept asking if cannabis causes paralysis. I slept in her room that night because I was her support person. She tried edibles 2 more times after that and then decided it wasn't her type of experience. Story 51. Before I tell you this story, I need to explain a couple of things. Everything takes place in Brazil where we speak Portuguese. That will be important. The story is about a friend of mine whose parents are from Lebanon. Although he was born in Brazil, he has a name that is very uncommon here. Let's call him Nadim Farhat El Khoury. Not his real name. It was my last year of college. From my campus to the state capital, it was about a 6-hour drive. Not an impossible distance, but not something you would do regularly either, especially as a broke college student. My friend Nadim was in the state capital at the time, about to start an internship, and he needed an updated copy of his transcripts, along with a signed statement proving he was still enrolled in school. There was no way he could catch a bus and make it to campus in time to get everything that same day, so I volunteered to pick up the papers and send them to him via express mail, which I did. Since these were important documents and I was sending them express, I asked for a return receipt to confirm the package was safely delivered. Did I really need one? No. Nadim could just tell me when he got the package. But I guess I was overly anxious at the time. A few days later, I got the return receipt. It stated that the package had been received by Nadim Fart El Salvador. Again, Nadim Fart El Salvador. Fart is not even a Portuguese word. While Salvador might be a plausible mistake, El Salvador was just too much. I burst out laughing right by my mailbox and couldn't stop as I called Nadim to tell him what had happened. Luckily, he's a chill guy and didn't take offense. He laughed along with me. For months, I kept calling him just a Latin American young man, in reference to the Brazilian song by Belchior, but added that he smelled like crap. Years later, as I was packing to move, I found that return receipt again. And yep, still funny as ever. Story 52. My mother was at a formal dinner for a fundraiser with which she was only vaguely associated. She didn't know many people there and wasn't seated with anyone familiar. It wasn't a problem for her because she loves talking to people and making friends. She's quite the extrovert. During the dinner, a man who was probably around 10 years older than her introduced himself by saying, "My name is Witty." My mom, who enjoys making jokes, responded with, "And are you?" He just looked at her without answering, and no one at the table laughed, so she thought maybe they hadn't heard her joke over the noise from the hall. She repeated, "And are you?" He blinked at her and then pointed to another woman talking to someone at a different table, saying, "And that's my wife, Marie." I don't actually remember his wife's name, but it doesn't matter. Someone else at the table interjected and changed the subject. My mom shrugged it off, thinking it wasn't that funny, and continued her evening as usual. At the end of the night, she was speaking with a friend she knew when Witty and his wife passed by on their way out. Her friend said goodbye to them, but mistakenly said, "Bye, Woody." My mother misheard his name, and when she realized it, she asked him, "And are you?" twice. Fortunately, she enjoys laughing at herself and loves sharing this story with anyone who thinks their embarrassing moments are the worst. Story 53. A man is on a Zoom call, screen sharing. Behind him, his toddler lets their pet goat into the house. The goat jumps on the couch and eats a pillow. Chaos unfolds, but he doesn't notice until he finally turns around and says, "Oh no, not again." Story 54. I was about 16 and going somewhere with my mother in the car. She was driving. We stopped at some traffic lights, and my mother turned to me and asked, "Who do you think is the better driver, me or your father?" Without hesitation, I replied, "Dad." Without question, Dad is a much better driver than you. It's not even a competition. She thought about this for a moment, then said, "I think I am." A second later, she rear-ended the car in front of us. The poor guy we hit was frustrated, and his mood was not helped by the fact that we were laughing uncontrollably when we pulled over to exchange information. Story 55. Not a story, but a photo of Paris Hilton kissing a woman's belly, thinking she was pregnant when she wasn't. It gets me every time. Story 56. The ones that are not repeated because the beauty of it was the timing. Trying to recreate the scenario is like trying to explain the joke. You can't. So the new one-liner will have to do. My one-liner for the whole story is, "It's past the point of George." The story is from 1992. There are 10 people on the planet who still instantly know what the sentence means. It still has context that makes sense every time. The same group of friends has these one-liners. "Tom, you have my keys." "Someone saved my life tonight." "Fire in her eyes." "Got your panties in the tree." Story 57. That Spaniard with the unusual laugh is talking about something. I have no idea what he is saying, but it is fun to hear him say it. Story 58. The time I got a nosebleed on stage while performing in Beauty and the Beast caused the actor playing Gaston to faint. Story 59. Years ago, when I was in junior high, we were having dinner at home. My stepdad grilled chicken and my mom made a salad. In the middle of dinner, out of the blue, he said, "These are really good breasts." My mom and I made eye contact and absolutely lost it. My stepdad was mortified for a moment. 30 years later, my mom and I still bring it up. Story 60. My wife had a silly nickname for her friend and coworker, the abrasive potato. She was called abrasive by a customer because she processed a return that she could have handled anyway. I had a day off and decided to make an actual abrasive potato for my wife to gift her friend. I spent a lot of time picking out the right potato, cutting thin strips of sandpaper, and gluing them to the potato. Came out looking great. A friend asked if I did anything else on my day off since he saw the potato on my social media. At the time, I was reading a bunch of self-help books, so I mentioned, "I'm trying to stay creative, work on my business, and better myself." Then it hit me. I started to laugh. By gluing sandpaper to a potato, we were out of breath, our stomachs hurting, and we laughed for about 15 minutes. I still get a good laugh from how absurd that sentence was. Story 61. Recently, I was walking home with my little brother, and apparently, my granddad told him that midges are called midgets. My 8-year-old brother said, "The midges are about to come out soon." You can imagine the mental image in my head before I realized what he actually meant. Story 62. Years ago, I worked as a contract fencer in southwest Queensland with an old family friend, Ross. Ross is quite the character and a fencer by trade. He needed an offsider, and since I wasn't doing anything at the time, I worked for him for about 6 or 7 months. It was by far the most entertaining job I've ever had. After a long day's work, we arrived back at our workers' hut. We worked on remote properties, driving to the work site on Monday morning, staying there for the week in a worker's cabin, and driving home Friday afternoon or evening. Workers' huts varied in quality. Some were little guest houses, which was nice, while others were shacks without electricity or running water. This one was okay. It had electricity but no water. We had to use a donkey. A donkey is a large drum full of rainwater heated over fire that we used for showers and the like. On Monday afternoon, rapidly approaching evening, we were exhausted after a long day of fencing in the Queensland heat. I was unloading the utility vehicle while Ross tried to get the donkey started so we could have showers before it got too dark. I finished my task, but there was an issue. The fire wouldn't really start. Ross managed to get it lit, but it was weak, and if we were going to heat the water properly, we needed it to burn well. He got impatient and said, "Go to the utility vehicle. There's an old motor oil bottle with the label scratched off in the back. Grab it for me, will you?" I found the bottle and brought it back. I handed it to him, and he confidently stated, "This'll get her started." I was concerned. "Are you sure that's safe?" I asked as he unscrewed the cap and prepared to toss some of the contents on the fire. "Oh sure, it's my own mix of 50% petrol and 50% diesel. It's fine. I am not a chemist or engineer and have little knowledge of fuel, but the instinct that has evolved in my brain to alert me when something doesn't seem safe was going off." I backed away. "I'm not sure that's right, Ross." He ignored me and started tossing the mix onto the fire. After a couple of good splashes, which did help the fire, he went for one final splash. What happened next was too fast for my eyes to see. Despite looking directly at the scene before me, there was a loud bang, and it took a second for me to comprehend what had happened. The sound was so loud that I had to look away from Ross, instinctively turning toward the noise to see what caused it. The noise was the motor oil bottle hitting the worker's hut 40 meters away at incredible speed. I then followed the thin but straight black smoke trail from the impact site back to Ross, who stood frozen, staring at his now empty hand with confusion. As understanding dawned on me, I collapsed into the dirt, weeping with laughter. All I remember from my position on the ground, tears streaming from my eyes, was hearing Ross, still frozen, say, "That's never happened before. I've never laughed harder, and I doubt I ever will." Story 63. I used to have strange dreams during school about 15 years ago. In these dreams, my friend would die in a tragic accident, and we would laugh about it. I have shared a few of these dreams with the group, and we still enjoy the laughter together. One friend, who is the closest in the group, often appears in my dreams, and I've even played a supporting role in my own dreams involving him, as far as my memory serves me. This was around the time when the movie Final Destination 3 or Final Destination 4 came out, around 2010. Story 64. I once had to go to the bathroom in my own backyard because a person who is deaf was locked in our only bathroom. Story 65. Oh, the night of Agatha, Greta, and Sam. That's one way to continue a perfectly civilized work Christmas lunch by spending the rest of the afternoon in a neighboring pub. On the way, I was already demonstrating yoga moves with daffers with the help of some bollards. I didn't see the chains in between, so I laddered my tights, but it's okay because I always carry a spare. Then there were the medical sales colleagues who decided we were having too much fun and wanted to join us, which brings to mind the idea that necessity is the mother of invention. Our new names. He came to me first and I picked a sensible name, but the girls went rogue, which was hilarious. Then we realized we were a little tipsy and had to find a way to get home, 5 miles away, without walking alongside a busy road. So, bless him, I called my boyfriend, now husband, and in our infinite wisdom, we decided we had sobered up a little in the car singing to Maroon 5. So we continued our pub crawl to our local. First, we stopped at home to use the bathroom, and that's when Greta fell over what was left of the wall at the front of our house, all 2 inches of it, and went face first into the dirt, legs still moving as if she were upright. Agatha has the filthiest laugh, which made the whole situation a million times worse. As a group, we were inconsolable for a good 10 minutes trying to stop laughing. We all managed to make it into work by 8 a.m. the next morning, some of us worse than others, and decided to head to the cafeteria for a bacon sandwich, kill or cure. I didn't go on many benders when I was younger, so this is a fun memory of silly times with friends. Story 66. Sinatra promises a man he will say hello to him so he can impress a group of business colleagues. However, when Sinatra approaches him, the man tells Sinatra he is busy and to come back later. Story 67. The story is about when one of my bullies said, "Who left this bull in the open?" At that time, I was overweight, and when I told my older brothers, they couldn't control their laughter. They taught the bully a lesson, but even today, it makes them laugh whenever they remember it. Story 68. This was in the neighborhood. Sitting on the low wall at the corner, several of us were just relaxing. This corner was a 3-way stop, and one of the streets sloped downhill to it. A mutual acquaintance was coming down the hill. She was a hefty lady and had prominent legs. One guy remarked, "Her legs look like they argue," and everyone there burst out laughing. I couldn't help but laugh when I recounted this story later that day and nearly every time thereafter, because of how much it made everyone else laugh. Story 69. My friend dared me to meow at a cat on the street. I did, and the cat's owner meowed back at me, dead serious. I had no idea what to do. Story 70. Many years ago, I worked at a grocery store with a friend. We were working on the top shelf overstock together. He stood on the work cart while handing me down stock to put on the shelf. I left to get us each a chocolate bar, and I got him a Mr. Big. He put it in his right pocket and we continued to work. An older woman walked into the aisle, stopped, looked at my friend on the cart, and quietly said, "Oh my God," while gazing at him before leaving. I was confused, so I turned to my friend and realized that the Mr. Big in his pants made him look inappropriate. I burst out laughing, almost crying, and my friend had no idea why until I pointed it out, and then he started laughing. It's been 19 years, and I still call him Mr. Big whenever I see him. Story 71. I was with my parents one day years ago, somewhere way up north camping in Australia, when we came across a dry riverbed. My mother is a bit of a fossicker, so we stopped for a picnic and to look at rocks for a bit. We were far out in the middle of nowhere around lunchtime, and I saw an old fence with a beautiful adolescent sulfur-crested cockatoo sitting on it all alone, watching us in the shade of some trees. There was a house not far back from it, in serious disrepair, apparently long abandoned, little more than a shack, truth be told. The cockatoo was a pristine, almost blinding, angelic white, aside from the crest. I decided to approach and see if it wanted some food. It was unbothered by my approach, and to my surprise, accepted a grape from my hand. Excited, I called my parents over. Out came some more fruit to share with what must be a tame but lost bird. We had leftover porridge from breakfast and had to mime ourselves eating from a spoon before the young fellow got the idea. But soon he was into that too. It was marvelous. We were talking to it, feeding it, and having a great time. Then, without warning, along came a gala. This old bird was rough around the edges, a bit grubby, and he looked ancient. He landed right in the middle of us, on the decaying fence post, and started waddling back and forth. Delighted, my mother offered him some fruit as well, while asking his name. To our complete surprise, the old gala stood up as tall as he could and said clear as a bell, "Call me what me auntie threw me through." We were shocked, of course. After a brief stunned silence, I hesitantly asked, "What did they throw?" When I was interrupted by the gala, who now ruffled himself up and fairly yelled, "A chair!" At which point he strutted back and forth while eyeballing us in turn, as if to say, "Ain't that something?" I had to hold on to the fence to stop from collapsing with laughter. We got no more out of the old bird, but he insisted on being fed first, taking whatever was offered to either of them, taking a bite or two, then passing the remains on to the younger cockatoo. We decided that they both must have been tamed pets of whoever used to live in the shack and were sadly left to their own devices once the owner died or moved away. Once we had exhausted our fruit and porridge, they flew off into the trees, and we carried on our way. I haven't thought about Mr. Chair in years. I do hope he and his young ward got along okay in the years since, and that Auntie got what was coming to her. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.